Hello, I'm Peter Mansbridge. One-on-one today in Baghdad with the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz. Sir, earlier today one of my colleagues used the analogy 1 minute to 12 in terms of the situation here, in terms of war. Do you think that's an accurate description of where we are right now?
Well, we have to take the threats seriously. We are taking them seriously. We are preparing ourselves in all areas to face this aggression. But we still hope that it will not happen, because it's bad for us, of course. It's bad for the region, and it's bad for the world. The better thing is to try to find a peaceful solution to this matter. The inspectors are in place in Iraq. They have a mandate. They should let them complete their mandate.
Well, what would have to happen for the clock to be turned back, for it not to be so close to war? What would have to happen?
Well, the inspectors should continue their work in Iraq. They should report to the Security Council. And we hope that in the end they should report to the Security Council, and that the Security Council will decide on lifting the sanctions according to Resolution 687 and other resolutions.
Well, the inspectors certainly did say in their report that they wanted more time.
Yes.
But they also said they wanted more cooperation.
Okay, no, the question of cooperation is a matter to be discussed, you see. There are different views about it. For instance, the question of the interviewing of scientists, experts. We have to respect the will of the scientists. There are some practical matters in the interviews. The scientists are Iraqis. The interviewers are foreigners. Not necessarily that every Iraqi scientist can speak English fluently and correctly. And many of them are afraid that they might be misinterpreted. It happened during an interview with a scientist. Immediately, Al-Movic spokesman said that we have found something very important related to the nuclear program. Then it appeared that it was a slip of tongue, you see.
But still on the question of what they did say about your country.
They are asking Iraq to provide more cooperation. Okay, let them say that, you see. We are doing that. And as I said, what were the items of difference between Iraq on the one side and the two gentlemen on the other side who represent the United Nations, Blix and Baradei? Two issues. The interviewing of the scientists and the use of the U-2. Nothing else. All other aspects of cooperation have been met, and we promise to be more forthcoming in the future, replying to all their needs in the way that will satisfy them.
There were a couple of questions that were raised in the report by Blix, but also in the speech by Colin Powell in Davos, and they dealt. Let's deal with one in particular, this issue of anthrax, that there is missing anthrax that Iraq has admitted to having had, how much it destroyed, where it destroyed it, and where the missing anthrax is.
This matter was addressed thoroughly in the 90s, thoroughly and deeply. UNSCOM did not want to be convinced that this matter is resolved, because the policy of UNSCOM was to keep all files open so that the Security Council will not be obliged to discuss lifting the sanctions. And that was the American and British policy. And UNSCOM was serving the Americans and the British, as it appeared on the 16th of December 1998, when they withdrew in the morning and the bombing started late in the evening. But this matter was discussed thoroughly, independently by the Amorim Commission. And the final report of Ambassador Amorim said that those remaining issues could be addressed in the monitoring phase, which means that they are not major disarmament issues. They are issues that have to be addressed in the course of time, in the course of the monitoring phase. And that was the objective assessment of the situation. When Powell speaks about those things, he speaks about them as if they are real weapons, you see, in the hands of the Iraqis, and they might be used, as he alleges, they might be given to terrorists, and the terrorists will use them against the American people and create an American movie about it, you see. This is manipulation of facts. This is not significant.
Iraq has no anthrax.
Iraq has no anthrax.
Iraq has no missing, and there's no missing anthrax. All the anthrax that Iraq had, it's declared.
Anthrax, all the biological weaponry were obliterated in 1991. And we presented hundreds of evidence to the inspectors of ANSCOM. They didn't want to admit that that was correct, you see, because Sperzel, who was in charge of the biological file, an American, who is still now speaking the same language as he was speaking in the 90s, because he's an American. He's an FBI expert.
Why are you unable to convince the UN or the Americans on the anthrax issue?
The Americans don't want to be convinced at all. The Americans have an objective of regime change. This has been the policy of the first Bush, of the Clinton administration, of the second Bush. When they want to change this regime and bring a pro-American regime to rule Iraq, they would not be convinced of the facts. Because if they are convinced of the facts, they should let Iraq free. They should stop attacking Iraq, threatening Iraq, and they should stop their hostile policy towards Iraq and lift the sanctions imposed on Iraq. That is the natural consequence of admitting the truth and accepting the Iraqi explanations. They don't want to, simply because they have, it was a hidden agenda, now it is not a hidden agenda, now it's a declared agenda.
Back one-on-one with Tariq Aziz here in Baghdad right after this. Back one-on-one here in Baghdad with Tariq Aziz, the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq. So just to recap, chemical and biological weapons, Iraq at this point has none.
Yes.
Why are your soldiers training in chemical weapons outfits?
Because they might be attacked with chemical weapons by the Americans. This is normal, you see, in your army in Canada. Your army might be equipped, I don't know in exact terms, but your army might be equipped with equipments to protect your soldiers from the use of chemical weapons. This is normal.
Do you think the Americans would use chemical weapons?
The Americans might do anything. They are enemies and they are threatening our nation. They might do anything.
The son of the president gave a speech last week, or a comment last week, where he suggested that if the United States attacked Iraq, that in response, Iraq would make September 11th look like a picnic. What did he mean by that?
Well, that's his statement. It's not my statement. I don't speak on behalf of anybody else, but I could say, and I would say that if the Americans try to invade Iraq, they will be fought courageously and effectively, and they will have a great number of casualties.
That statement implied that there would be some attack on the United States that would cost more than 3,000 lives.
It doesn't, because we don't have the means and we don't have the wish to make any mischief to the United States inside the United States. We are going to fight the United States when the United States starts its aggression on Iraq and when the U.S. Army enters the territory of Iraq. We will fight them courageously, effectively, and we will inflict great losses on them.
Would you take any action to any country outside of Iraq?
No. We will fight within our territory.
So unlike the last time when you fired Scud missiles into Israel?
Unlike the last time, because the last time we did have long-range missiles and we attacked Israel because Israel was in full cooperation with the Americans in their aggression on Iraq. There were American troops in Saudi Arabia, American troops, American bombing from Bahrain, from Qatar, and therefore those were legitimate targets. When you are attacked by a certain spot, you have to retaliate when you have the means. First of all, there are no means. We don't have the means to attack beyond our territory. The longest missile we have is 150 kilometers. 150 kilometers cannot reach any neighboring country as well as Israel.
So nothing into Kuwait, where the
Kuwait
major
now is a
troop buildup
battlefield.
is?
Kuwait is a battlefield, and the American troops are in Kuwait and preparing themselves to attack Iraq. If there will be an attack from Kuwait, I cannot say that we will not retaliate. We will, of course, retaliate against the American troops wherever they start their aggression on Iraq. This is legitimate.
How, if it does come to war, how do you see that war unfolding?
Well, I'm sure that we will survive.
How?
We will. We did survive in 1991, and we will survive. We are a very brave nation. Our people have ingenuity. We are a very active government, and we can recover from the losses of the war. We did in 1991. In 1991, they inflicted great losses on us, but we recovered. We rebuilt, including this building, which we are sitting in now. It was destroyed in 1991. Now it's a fine building. We are working in it.
I assume it would be a target again, would it not?
It could be, yes.
Can you win, though?
Win? No, here you see the concept of winning the war is different from the war that happened in 1991, First World War, Second World War. We are not fighting the Americans in their own homeland. We are not fighting them in Europe or in Asia or in the Sahara. We are being attacked by the Americans. If the Americans fail to achieve their objectives, then we will be winning the war, and they will be losing the war.
There has been much talk that a conflict would be street to street, house to house, in the cities of this country, especially in this city, in Baghdad. Do you see that happening?
Well, they are speaking about regime change. They cannot change the regime by remote control, and they cannot change the regime by using long-range missiles and long-range aeroplanes. That's clear. If they want to change the regime in Iraq, they have to fight the Iraqi people and the Iraqi army and the Arab Baath Socialist Party on the ground. Ground means cities. They have to come to the cities to remove us from our places in government. So that means that they have to fight us here, in the streets of Baghdad, in the streets of Basra, in the streets of Mosul, and in the streets of each and every Iraqi city and town.
What do you think the people will do if it comes to
They will
that?
fight the Americans. They will fight the Americans. You know, the Americans are fancying themselves. They are cheating themselves that they will be received with flowers. They will be received with bullets, not flowers. We have distributed hundreds of thousands of pieces of arms, and we are confident of the reaction of our people. No government which is afraid of its people might make an uprising against it, will distribute so many arms, you see, to ordinary citizens.
Are you actually giving guns to ordinary citizens?
Yes.
Every citizen?
Yes.
There are some in the United States and in Britain who feel that if this does in fact come to a conflict, that it would be over in a week or 2 weeks.
Let them try. Let them try. They are cheating themselves in that, you see. This nation, the people of Iraq, are going to fight courageously and effectively for as long as it takes them to fight to defend their sovereignty.
But it makes it sound like a massive killing ground if that in fact happened.
We are not killing anybody. They will be killing us, you see, and we will retaliate, and that's legitimate. We are not going to the streets of New York and Washington to fight the Americans. When they come to our towns and cities, we'll fight them.
But how long could you hold out against the...
As long as it takes us to defend our country.
But you concede this is the greatest military force that's ever been formed.
It is, but we are not at war with America. We are not fighting the Americans in America. We are fighting the Americans in Iraq, and that's different. That gives you an advantage when you are fighting in your own homeland. You know every street, you know every corner, and you have the willingness, the determination to protect your sovereignty, to protect your national interest, this gives you an advantage which the Americans don't have.
I found a quote of yours, at least you're quoted in an essay by a British academic by the name of Tony Dodge. I think you made these remarks last September. People say to me, this is you talking, people say to me, you, the Iraqis, are not the Vietnamese. You have no jungles and swamps to hide in. I reply, let our cities be our swamps and our buildings our jungles.
That's correct. That's correct.
So you see yourselves as the new Vietnam?
Well, I don't want to compare my country with another country because the differences are clear, but we do have the potential to defend our cities from the American invaders.
We've got to take our last break, Mr. Aziz. We appreciate your time. Back one-on-one with Tariq Aziz here in Baghdad right after this. Back one-on-one for final thoughts with Tariq Aziz here in Baghdad. If it's going to be that costly a war, that many people could die in, why is the issue of exile not one that would be seriously considered?
Exile means surrender. This nation, the Iraqi nation, is not going to surrender to the blackmail and to the threats of the Americans.
But you yourself conceded or suggested that the Americans only want regime change. And if that's the price to pay to save thousands of lives, is
the
that
Iraqi people have chosen this regime or this political system. They have supported it for 35 years. They fought 8 years against Iran to protect their sovereignty and to protect their choice, their free choice of government. And they will do so with the Americans and with any aggressor. We are not going to surrender. Let them dream of that. But this is not the country. This is not the nation. This is not the leadership that's going to surrender to the Americans. We will fight to the last bullet.
When the referendum took place last fall and Saddam Hussein won 100% of the vote, outside of this country, people, they just didn't believe it.
Yes, I'm not surprised to hear that, but we believe it. The Iraqis believed it.
But you actually believe that not one person in this country...
Well, at that time, you see, if you have been in Iraq at that time, when there is a referendum and there is elections in your country, you go to the electorate box and you don't take your children with you. You don't wear the best of your clothes. You don't take candies with you to distribute to the other people who are in the electoral post. They did. The Iraqis did that, and that means that they were voluntarily voting for Saddam Hussein as their president, and that means unanimity.
In 1990 and 91, before the Gulf War, you engaged in a face-to-face series of meetings with Jim Baker. The US One meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Jim Baker. Is there any thought of something like that again?
If they propose a meeting with us, we will go to meet them.
So if they asked now, the new administration...
Yes, we will do. We will go to meet them.
Who would have to ask?
Now, I can tell you on behalf of the Iraqi government, we are ready to talk to the American government if the American government is willing to talk. We are ready to talk to the British government if Mr. Blair is ready to talk. But if they invite us, we will go, of course, because this is our policy. This is our basic attitude.
Why don't you ask for the meeting?
We have made our position clear in this regard for the last 12 years, since the end of the war. But neither the first Bush administration, nor the Clinton administration, nor this administration has ever reciprocated to our calls for a dialogue.
But are you calling for a dialogue now?
I do now. I can repeat it, you see, easily, because this is the basic policy of my government.
Would it be worth having a dialogue with the United States?
For us, yes, why not? Why
Your,
not?
your own foreign minister today called them evil.
They are.
Well, what's the point of having dialogue with someone you consider evil?
Well, when I met with Mr. Baker in 1991, it did not result in a peaceful solution, because the decision of war was already taken. It was just a public relations show for him, because he wanted to go to the Congress and say, look, we talked to the Iraqis. And then he got a vote from the Congress at that time, a very slim vote, you see, supporting his war effort. I mean, President Bush, former President Bush.
So in spite of that, you'd still think it would be worth it?
Yes, why not? We are civilized people, and we have to think of a civilized way to end this crisis.
And you still think at what appears to be this late hour, this crisis can be averted?
Maybe yes, maybe not.
Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
I am optimistic about the future of my nation. I think this nation, which has survived for millenniums, will survive. And the Americans are not going to break the will of the people of Iraq. And Iraq will survive, and Iraq will continue its path of progress and development.
Tariq Aziz, we really appreciate your time tonight. I know you've been busy today.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.